Summer 1976, one of the courtyards in Rostov-on-Don. In the heat, the local child bathes with visible pleasure in a makeshift reservoir, and it was completely normal. Oh, the Russian road, 7 bends a mile. This song from the famous trilogy, Gadamerins, Go, is immediately recalled when looking at this photo taken somewhere on a country road in the summer of 1976. And this photo was taken in 1976 or 1977 by the American photographer Dean Conger, who traveled around the USSR for many years. On it, the veteran of the armed forces of the Union Abram Morduhovich and the acting colonel Dmitry Boyarkin dine in the compartment of the composition rushing along the Trans-Siberian Railway. This photo of the same author was taken around the same time in Odessa, at one of the meetings of local Baptists. Here, believers listen intently to the priest, and some of the more than 1,000 parishioners even record the sermon on tape recorders. And this is also Odessa in the second half of the 1970s. This is how the famous Potemkin staircase looked like in those days. And on the Odessa beaches of that time in the holiday seasons, it was really not to push from vacationers. This can be evidenced by a photograph taken in the summer of 1981. However, in other Black Sea resorts, vacationers were not much less. This is what the beach in Pitsand looked like in the summer of 1982. And this is the most common morning on September 1, 1976 in Kazan. The summer holidays are over and the children are going to school again. This was how the main street of the capital of the Ukrainian SSR, the city of Kyiv, Khreshchatyk, looked in the summer of 1981. Before the first Maidan, there is still a little less than a quarter of a century. Well, this photo was taken in 1977 on the street of the very young city of Bratsk, built together with the Bratsk hydroelectric station. The first date is always memorable for life, especially if there is also a photo from it. Like this one, made in the pioneer camp, Romantic, in the Odintsovo district of the Moscow region in the summer of 1976. I wonder how the fate of this couple turned out and where they are now, more than 46 years later. The caption under the photo says that the girl's name is Nina, and the young man's name is Vladimir. This was how an elementary military training lesson looked like in one of the schools in the Oryol region in 1979. This subject in those days was mandatory for high school students. This is how machine guns looked like in the USSR of the late 1970s. They were very popular with children of all ages, and adults too. 1979. An ordinary photo of an ordinary Soviet family on an ordinary day off at home, taken in the city of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. I did a good job, you can have a good rest, as people do in the Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky restaurant in the same 1979. Although it is possible that some kind of solemn event or holiday is celebrated. For example, Sailor's Day, which was held annually cheerfully and with a twinkle in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. That's what this event looked like in 1979. In the summer of 1980, the 22 Summer Olympic Games were held in Moscow. The mascot of which was the famous bear. This was how the streets of the capital looked on the eve of the main international sports competition of that time. Goodbye to our affectionate Misha, go back to your fairy tale forest. How many years have passed since then, and the sight of Mishka flying away into the distance is still mesmerizing. Perhaps because the next era in the life of our country flew away with it. Go to the potatoes is an expression well known to everyone who lived in those days. So these engineering and technical workers help rural workers in the Yaroslavl region in the fall of 1976. Such queues near shops began to appear in all cities of the country in the mid-1970s. They meant that some kind of shortage appeared on sale. The person in this photo today is perfectly familiar to millions of people living in the post-Soviet space, but she herself is very unusual. Because it was made in 1982 at the festival of the Leningrad Rock Club and performs at it. Viktor Soy. At that moment, he was still known only to a very narrow circle of underground fans. Although in those days erotic photography in the USSR was essentially banned, nevertheless there were photographers who worked in this area. One of them is Ramontis Dievichus. In the Perestroika 1987, he released an album of photographs in the nude genre, Flowers Among Flowers, which was simply a stunning success. The works collected in it date back to about 1976 to 1986, and one of them is presented here. Everything ever inevitably ends. So, with the death of L.I. Brezhnev on November 10, 1982, the era of stagnation ended. The next 2.5 years turned out to be timeless, and the so-called perestroika came after him, but they will be discussed next time.